Hello there. Welcome back to the Senate Podcast. We're on episode 23. And you know what? I think this is probably the most special hello there we could ever have in any of our episodes because we're talking about A New Hope today. And that is where the hello there phrase came from. You know, it came from a movie a long time ago, from a galaxy far, far away. That was who knew that back then that one little hello there would be so famous, infamous, whatever. But
I didn't
we open
really
up the show
know
with that.
that was in this movie, and then I rewatched it recently, and he said it, and I was like, oh, like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme.
Yeah, so I am joined here today by my co-host Tony. Tony, you are the wizard today. You're going to be the wizard.
Cool.
Or do you want to be the No, you're not a fan of Han.
No, I
was going to say the smuggler.
We'll get into that, but
okay.
That's not exactly true, but
All right. Yeah, you'll be the wizard today. Thanks for coming on. We're doing Star Wars retrospectives, and we're kind of going in order of episode, kind of how George said they should be watched. So 1, 2, 3, and then now we're on episode 4, A New Hope, the first Star Wars film to be released. So this movie's interesting because this was the first one. So there wasn't an established lore before the movie came out, even though George did have outlines and, the Journal of the Wills or whatever, the Adventures of Luke Starkiller. He had stuff made up, but when we're going over movies like episode 1, 2, and especially 3, there is decades worth and tons of content worth of backstory and lore to dive into. So because this was the beginning of everything that was kind of everything that's kind of there in details or in the background that we can dive into was kind of added after the fact. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Just watching this movie for what it is, this was where a lot of stuff came from. It's not necessarily where this movie wasn't influenced by a lot of other Star Wars content because it's the first. So when you first, tell me your story about how you experienced these movies, because I know it's a little different than most probably, because I'll let you go ahead and explain that. But yeah, Star Wars was originally episode 4 from the beginning, and it was the middle of the story. This was the start of everything. So it's going to be fun to go way back and experience an old, a classic like this movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I, like Caleb, I was a kid growing up when the prequels came out. So I saw those. I don't remember that vividly seeing Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but I saw Revenge of the Sith when I was 12. It was like my favorite thing ever for a period of time. But I didn't actually see the original trilogy until I was like 18, something like that. And aside from, like finding out that Darth Vader was Luke's father, because that's like the most famous plot twist. Like people who don't even like Star Wars know that because it's just, that embedded in pop culture and has been for a long time. So, it's pretty cool because the apartment I'm living in now, I've lived here for over 10 years. And, at some point after my mom and I moved in, somebody she knew, either a friend or just an acquaintance, actually let her have, some old VHS tapes. So the way that I saw the original trilogy wasn't with the special editions that kind of ruin everything except Empire, but the OGs, baby.
Yeah, the OG. Pulled them out. No way, bro.
The OG VHS. So I got to watch these movies as they originally came out. And, it was crazy, because I didn't know that many plot details, like I said. So watching these movies and not knowing really what happened and being surprised by certain things, especially in Return of the Jedi, was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had watching any franchise.
Yeah. So I grew up watching the originals on VHS just like that. And then eventually, what was it, 2005 when the special editions came out, or whenever that came out. Uh, I've seen them on VHS. I I don't know. I know I saw the original, not the original, but the prequels originally in theaters, but I don't remember them because I was too young to really remember my theater experience with it. I remember Revenge of the Sith a little bit in theaters, but the original trilogy I grew up watching on VHS, and I loved A New Hope. My this is what I would do. I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into Empire, but I would go through and start with 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, and 3 in the span of a day or two, and just watch all of them, either in order or in film release order, whatever. There's all kinds of different watch orders for these,
Yeah, yeah.
but Episode 4 it's crazy that it remains one of the best to this day out of the entire
I
saga.
blew my freaking mind when I saw it for the first time. Like, I
Yes.
just like, like to quote the review of the movie from the late Roger Ebert, watching this movie for the first time was an out of body experience.
Yeah. And
100%.
so I actually want to get into a little what is it, anecdote right here. I was watching a documentary called Empire of Dreams on Disney Plus, and this documentary just in general is amazing. But one of the cool things is it gets into what was going on behind the scenes of the creation and release and whatnot of A New Hope. And it's funny because you were talking about an out of body experience. And George, when he had the first draft of the movie done, he said he invited his close friends to see it, and he showed it to some studio executives. And his close friends that came and saw it, like Steven Spielberg and some other people, they saw the movie and they were like, "Okay, it's all right. We don't really get it. It's okay." So
Mm.
George kind of got into a little panic, had to fire his editor, re-edit the whole movie because it didn't fit. Now he took that and he also showed it to the executives at Fox. He said that the executives at Fox gave it a standing ovation, and he said that one of the executives in particular got very emotional and was crying because of
Oh,
how
wow.
because of the movie. So then it pulls up that executive, and they're asking him about his experience first time watching this, and the executive, I can't remember his name, but anyways, he said that seeing this movie, he never dreamed that he would actually see something like this in his lifetime or in ever. He thought that this was only capable in his dreams, and that George was able to create something, with ILM that was so mind-blowing in advance for the time. You know what I mean? Even watching it today, dude, the practical effects and the optical effects, specifically the optical effects, look incredible. The explosions, I think they look cool, but you can tell
Oh,
the
yeah.
explosions are like CG, very basic VFX, you know what I mean? But the optical effects, like, let me just give you a little bit of behind the scenes right here. The runner at the beginning of the movie when it opens with the destroyer and it's chasing it. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
get this. That runner, I forget what the name of the ship is. That ship that's running with Leia on it. That model was 6 feet wide. Okay, that Star Destroyer model was half of its size, about 3 feet. But think about how it looks in the movie. You know what I mean? And these were all real props with optical effects, with practical effects. Obviously, there were some um, special effects added, but it was such a advanced thing George was going for, and it was amazing what he and ILM, his production company, were able to do. Well, the production company he
Oh, yeah,
hired
dude.
for it.
Like, this
Yeah,
is one of those movies, like, when I watch it, like, I obviously know, like, there's like practical effects, like practical
yeah,
explosions, models, miniatures, stuff like that.
I love that
But
stuff.
I, for the life of me, when I watch this trilogy, can't figure out how the hell it got made. I'm seeing, like, like, for
It
example,
shouldn't
like
have got made. Yeah,
to skip ahead to the climax, the run on the Death Star to blow it up. when it like cuts between the like model ships and stuff and showing the
Yes.
people inside, my brain can comprehend like, okay, like what's the cutoff between model and then showing somebody sitting inside of a,
Yeah.
I guess like a thing they build on a green screen. Like I can't tell like what's what. Like
Yeah.
it
So
just blows
after
my mind.
it's crazy because after the initial filming, it took them 18 months just to build those sets, like you see with the Death Star run and whatnot. So in the whole time, I didn't want to get into all this background, but it's so interesting. The executives at Fox were pushing on George to release the movie, and they were going to cancel it. And luckily, he had some people on his side really fighting for the movie, and they gave him more time, more money, more people. And I remember one interview they had with one of the execs where he said that Fox wanted this movie canceled, and they told him to go tell George to cancel it. And this guy, on behalf of George, told the studio that this was the greatest film ever made, and that was the only reason Fox didn't go and shut it down immediately, was because of the promise that this is the greatest movie ever to be made. And
Oh
honestly, at
wow.
that time, it probably was. And I think so because look at the impact that it's had
Did you
now,
know
this long, this far
it was
after.
nominated for Best Picture
Oh, I'm
and a
sure.
bunch of other Academy Awards?
Yeah,
Like that's crazy because now, like I feel like the Oscars is kind of pretentious a little bit. Like they don't really nominate franchise movies and stuff. But like back in the day, things like A New Hope were seen as viable enough to be nominated for not just like technical Academy Awards, but
yeah,
for Best Picture. Like it's so weird how the landscape of like film and how it's viewed seems to have kind of shifted for the most part.
yeah. Now it's funny because we get so into these deep dives and stuff. We talk about all of this extra stuff, but let's keep this episode a retrospective and talk about our nostalgia and our experience and what we think now going back and watching this movie. So the opening crawl. Let's just start there. I'm
One of
going to
the best in the
contradict
franchise,
I'm going to
I think.
contradict exactly what I just said because originally the crawl was terrible. George had this long confusing crawl that was didn't really make sense. And then he had somebody come in cuz they were reading it and they had no idea what any of it meant. So he had somebody come in and redo the crawl to make it simple and kind of easier for the viewer to just read through at the beginning because it was in George's mind everything was so in depth and complex, and you can obviously see that there's layers to everything. There's a backstory to everything, even if we never hear it or see it.
Yeah.
So I agree, though the crawl was perfect. He also wanted to call this A New Hope Episode 4, but the studio said that would be confusing. So when this initially released in theaters, it was just called Star Wars. And then it wasn't until they re-released this in theaters right before Empire that he added Episode 4, A New Hope to it,
Ah.
the actual title. So I got to stop with the background stuff. So anyways, tell me a little bit about what you think about the opening of this movie and the first acts and whatnot, where we get introduced to all of these iconic characters.
Yes, I feel like the opening of this movie is kind of, in the Phantom Menace episode, I kind of, like a lot of other people throughout history, criticize the opening of that movie because I get, like, I get it. It's supposed to be more an exploration of the politics, that lead to war because that's obviously a big part of war. It's not just fighting, which is cool. But like the opening crawl of that movie is talking about like, like, oh, the trade routes are being taxed and the Republic sent two
Yeah,
Jedi
I know.
Knights to go settle a tax dispute. Like that sounds like the most boring crap. But
That
like,
sounds like the
the
worst
opening
movie
crawl of
ever.
this movie is like the rebels are at
Yeah.
war with the Empire. And the very first shot we see is a rebel ship being pursued by a much larger Empire ship, and then they get boarded and, there's a firefight and it's just snappy, it just like throws
Yes.
you right into the middle of the action. There's no exposition, like, everything that's happening just by the little bit of information in the crawl. And then the action scenes, the directing, the pace of everything, we see Princess Leia, and we know, she's important, and then it is a little silly to see like C3PO and R2D2 just like running through the line of fire and not being shot at all. Like that's a little funny, but that's what Star Wars has always been. Like some people are
Yeah.
like, oh, like Disney, made like Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, like, the prequels in Disney made Star Wars more like aimed towards kids, but it's like, no, Star
No.
Wars was always aimed towards kids. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like we like spend like the first quarter of the movie with two robots,
That's
and only one of them speaks English, and just
so
whines all the time. Like it's always been that way.
hot take. I know everyone hates the Ewoks and whatnot from Jedi, but I love how fun that movie is, and just for kids and for anybody that movie is. And that's one of my gripes with Empire. I know we all like to be Robert, Ebert here, and where this Empire movie is a masterpiece, but it was the movie that was least for kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, and it was still fun, but anyways, A New Hope. The opening was, like you said, kind of silly with the droids, and it's interesting because George is telling this story through the point of view of the droids, and he deliberately wanted C3PO to talk and R2D2 just to make noises. But this is like really the first time ever, and how often do we even get this now in non-Star Wars content where you hear a machine and it sounds like they're talking. R2D2's beeps sound, it's so engaging. Same thing with Chewbacca when we get there.
Yeah.
He really took a lot of risks with the way he wanted to tell the story, and he didn't compromise on a lot of these things. So the opening of the movie was fun, seeing Vader for the first time, hearing him.
Oh yeah, dude. That
Yeah.
when he grabs the one guy and like starts interrogating him, when he squeezes his throat, I'm pretty sure you can hear like
Yeah,
it
I
like
think so.
crack. Like it's like it's kind of like a silly, lighthearted opening a little bit, but it's also kind of brutal. Like we see stormtroopers actually shoot people, and like not just shoot at people, but actually hit them. Imagine that, right? I kind of hate that
This
that's
movie's
become
so
like a
good.
meme, but yeah, like
Yeah,
like it, like it just does a good job of establishing like what the conflict is, with like like very snappy, concise dialogue. We know what we need to know. Even the political stuff in the movies pretty
it's
simple.
handled very well.
Like it's
Yeah.
really simple. It's easy to understand it.
Specifically, Leia, Carrie Fisher, really, really did a good job, and I believe she was only 19 years old during this
Oh, really?
movie. Yeah, she killed it, and yeah, that was handled very well. So you got the first part with Vader and Leia, him capturing her, but her sending the droids to get help from the wizard Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then we go to Utapau. Wait, actually, it's Tatooine, but
What?
originally
Oh, really?
George called this planet Utapau, but for
Huh.
some reason
Interesting.
they changed it. I don't know why.
Huh.
And obviously later in episode 3, he brought Utapau to the big screen, but he decided to go with Tatooine. So, and it's funny because before anything in the movie was decided, before it was called Star Wars, before it was something about the Wills, before he had the idea for Anakin and everything, the very first idea he ever had for Star Wars was a cantina scene. And that was something
Huh.
directly out of a John Wayne movie that he
Yeah.
saw where he was in a saloon. So that was the very first thing, and this was something that George obviously put a lot of love and care into because that cantina scene was incredible. It didn't,
Oh my
looking at
god.
the
Yeah. Like they made like the fact that like so many like practical like
yeah, exactly.
costumes were used, to show like all the different races and stuff to show up in the movie for maybe 5 seconds
Yep.
was crazy because nowadays they would just do do like a whole bunch of like bland special effects. Who cares?
Yeah.
But like there was so much craft put into every minute detail of this freaking movie, and it just blows my mind.
So the cantina scene was a lot of fun. That was so the cantina scene. It looked bad in person, like behind the scenes. Everybody kind of made fun of it on set. But like you said, you only when in the movie you only get a glimpse of some of the people in here. It kind of does a quick pan, quick cuts, and it keeps up the mystery that this is really like the Wild West in space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I think George really, really nailed with this. And obviously, this is where we end up meeting the smuggler and all of that. But back up a little bit, the droids land on Tatooine. They get picked up by the Lars. We get the introduction of Luke, Owen, Beru, and eventually the wizard pops up. Hello there. So, what do you think about the way Alec Guinness portrays Obi-Wan when he's introduced? Because I think it works. I think it's great. I think he works very well with Luke, and the dynamic between Luke and Obi-Wan in the original trilogy is amazing. So, do you have any gripes with Obi-Wan? What do you think about Luke? This is where we meet him for the first time, and it definitely leaves an impact, good or bad. So, how to make you feel about it?
Well, um I just want Tatooine is an absolute marvel of
Dude,
special effect.
amazing.
Like I still to this day don't know if the Jawa thing, it's a model presumably, but like it looks just like a real car. Like I forget that this is just a
Yeah,
regular desert. Like Luke's instantly relatable. He's just like a regular teenager, doing chores. He wants to do greater things, but he can't because he has to stay and help his uncle on the farm.
yeah,
Um, I, I do like the detail before I talk about Obi-Wan real quick that
yeah.
when Luke's at the table with Owen and Beru, and then he gets like mad and walks away because he can't join the academy.
I love that. I love
Beru's
that bit.
like
Yeah,
he's not meant to be a farmer. He has too much of his father in him, and then Owen's like, "That's what I'm afraid of." I noticed a detail I never noticed before. Because like Star Wars is all about duality. Light and dark,
yeah.
good versus evil. That Owen sees how Luke's similar to his dad as a negative thing. He sees the negative side of that, whereas Baru sees the positive side of it.
I
How
like that. Yeah.
and like it's just like this small thing. It's not like really touched
I
upon
wonder if
that
they were
much.
going for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and not like it's and I don't know. I just feel like right there, like that just gives you like a little glimpse as to like how like they're a couple that they're kind of different in some ways, and they kind of like balance each other out. Like
I
how
like.
Luke was essentially pulled between these two, like light and dark, but even before that, he was torn between the duality of am I gonna be like my dad in a negative sense or a positive sense? And then no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see the parallels between Anakin and Luke because Anakin in Phantom Menace, I'm gonna be the first person to see them all. He's talking about the stars,
Yeah.
and then you get to A New Hope, and Luke he wants to join the Academy and finally leave his planet, the same planet Tatooine, to go out into the galaxy, and he wanted to join the Academy and everything. So then obviously we know that he gets attacked by the sand person, and Obi-Wan kind of rescues him and takes him in, talks to him. But at that time, all that's going on, the Empire is looking for the droids on Tatooine and ends up tracking them to the Lars homestead, destroys them. And honestly, this is such great directing and storytelling and just everything. The way that plays out, because then Obi-Wan and Luke come back, he sees that they're dead. He has to go out now, looking out into the sunset. He has to decide that he is going to leave home, go out into the galaxy, help the princess, avenge his family, defeat the Empire, blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all set up brilliant within the first 30 minutes of the movie, I think. So, um, Obi-Wan, he goes back to the hut with Obi-Wan. Originally, it was supposed to be a cave, and it's funny because we actually kind of see that cave in Kenobi, but
Oh
they
yeah.
decided, yeah, George decided in A New Hope to make it a hut, sort of like just a house. So he goes there, and we get, I think, my favorite scene in the movie, actually, him talking to Obi-Wan, and them talking about three things here: the princess, the Clone Wars, and his father. And I love this because this was 77, and they mentioned the Clone Wars. That and they mentioned Anakin being seduced by Vader. You know what I mean? I love it.
Well, an
I think
interesting
it's
tidbit.
great.
I think you know
Yeah.
this, but originally, from everything I've read and heard, I'm not sure if it's 100% true. You'd probably know from the documentary that originally Darth Vader wasn't Anakin Skywalker. They were
Yeah.
two different
Yep.
people.
Originally, Darth
So,
Vader actually did
you
kill
know,
his father. Yeah.
it's a little weird watching like certain things in the original trilogy, like this scene, because originally it meant something else. You know, so like when Obi-Wan's like talking about Anakin and saying like he was a great friend and stuff, and he wanted you to have this lightsaber, and he your uncle Owen didn't think that he should have gotten involved with the Jedi. That's painting a different picture of events kind of
Yeah.
than we would see later. So that's like a thing that like it's obviously not a fault of this movie, but it is kind of one of those things where like I watched the original trilogy and there are certain things that I'm like, uh, I don't feel like this fits totally. But I mean, for all I know, there's like expanded lore where Anakin does mention that he would want to, pass down his lightsaber to his son or something,
See,
maybe.
that's interesting. I would love that. I wish he kind of would have talked about it in episode 3. But
Yeah.
anyways, what I love is the fact that you were right and the way George handles it though going forward, especially in I think it's in Jedi when this happens. We haven't watched those movies yet. So we're going to be doing that next. Spoiler alert. So I love how you're right, and George didn't know if this was going to get a sequel. They don't plan on sequels. Back then they didn't plan on it. He didn't know if this movie was going to get made. So this movie was a hit, and he had to go on to the next one. So then he decided, okay, Vader is his father, and then so on and so forth. But you get that exchange when Luke meets the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan. I believe it's in Jedi, and he said, "You lied to me," whatever. And Obi-Wan was like, well, from a certain point of view. And I think that really speaks to the you know downfalls of the Jedi. They weren't perfect. You know what I mean? They tried to see things through their own dogmatic views. And even Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, it kind of goes full circle. And yeah, it wasn't intended that at first, but I love how George kind of changed it and made it fit that, because even in Jedi, Obi-Wan was like, I didn't lie to you, but from a certain point of view, your father is dead. And then
I do
Luke,
like, yeah.
being the character that he is like, you know what, you might think he's dead, and the dogmatic views of your Jedi Order might say that he's dead to the dark side, but
I do
he's my
like,
father. I'm gonna
I
redeem
think
him.
Kenobi did a as great of a job as it could have kind of making this less egregious, because Obi-Wan says from a certain point of view, Darth Vader killed your father and he ceased to
Yeah,
be Anakin Skywalker. Well, then Kenobi shows that certain point of view was Vader's own point of view. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
he says, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did. And then Obi-Wan's like,
yeah.
fine then, and that's the first time he calls him Darth.
Darth.
He's like,
So
okay, fine,
yeah,
I'm gonna let you have it your way. I'm gonna leave you alone now. If that's how you see it, I hate that. It hurts me, but screw it. So I do kind of like that. It's like Obi-Wan in a way, even still, though he lost his friend to the dark side and he was like way far gone. was still kind of respecting his wishes by seeing him how he said to see him from his own words. Like I feel like that
Yeah,
made it better than just Obi-Wan kind of being an asshole and just being like,
I
I
think
mean,
yeah,
I
Kenobi
I didn't technically
really
lie to
added.
you. Like it
Yeah,
kind of made it more deep.
instead of just I didn't technically lie to you. Your father did die, and he, we went. He in Kenobi they did have that exchange, like you
Yeah.
said, and he is like kind of. It's not just him, Obi-Wan in his own head. It's like he this is what Anakin
Yeah, exactly.
decided. Yeah. All right, moving on. We actually get the cantina scene now. This is where they introduce Han Solo, and what's funny is they added George added this Greedo scene with Han Solo because they weren't able to actually add the Jabba scene that he originally wanted in the original theatrical release. So he kind of put this Greedo scene in there, and then obviously
They've
with the special
retconned this
editions they
Greedo
changed some
scene like
stuff.
5 times. I don't know why they keep messing with it. Like
Who
now,
cares? Yeah,
before Greedo dies, he says McClunky. What does McClunky
McClunky.
mean? I don't care. It's stupid.
Okay,
Whatever.
so we get the cantina scene. That scene was awesome. I love how they mirror it in Attack of the Clones. I love it.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, great. Alec Guinness kills this performance. They say on set that, like Harrison Ford said that on set, and Luke or Mark Hamill said on set that Alec Guinness brought a real sense of professionalism to this
Yeah.
because they all thought it was kind of absurd, but
Yeah.
Alec Guinness really was into the character, the master, the trainer, the
Yeah.
teacher of Luke, the apprentice, in this story that was about morality. It was about the light side, and Alec Guinness really wanted to portray that character. He killed it. So, Millennium Falcon. It's Falcon, not
Yeah.
Falcon.
Falk. Yeah, that's weird
All
that
right,
like he says it
glad we're
that
on the
way.
same page. Now I was going to kick you off the podcast if you pronounced it wrong. I'm sure we've all said Falcon, but it's the Millennium Falcon. Okay, so we'll have more to say about Han and the Falcon during the Solo retrospective. So they obviously hire them to take them to Alderaan. Little do they know, Alderaan was just destroyed by the greatest weapon in comic book or pop culture history up to that point, the Death Star. So really cool interrogation scene at this point where they're using the probe droids to interrogate Leia. I thought that was super cool, creepy.
I like how sassy
Awesome.
Leia is to
She's awesome.
Grand
Yeah.
Moff Tarkin. Like she's not like like scared.
So Carrie, I'm sorry, I got all this in my head, man. Carrie said that that's the way she talks. That she is that sassy to people, and she just could hear herself saying what Leia said to Tarkin. She said, I could see myself saying that because that's how I talk. And her response to Tarkin was very genuine. And I think the acting in this was pretty good, but the dialogue, it's obviously contentious. People don't think the dialogue is that great. And even I remember Carrie in the documentary talking about how she said that was a type of dialogue that was good on paper. But it didn't necessarily translate to live action, but
Yeah.
they committed. Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, they committed and they really believe what they were saying, even though it was absurd, talking about the moisture condensers, whatever
Yeah.
it is, and all the stuff, the Womp Rats and whatnot. Also, I thought of a great name for a podcast. It was the Womp Rats podcast. But we're not going to rebrand, but I think that's a cool name. So, what do you think up to this point now? Alderaan's destroyed. They appear. That's no moon. And we get now where they all come together. I think this is a cool part where obviously in the Force, Obi-Wan senses a great disturbance, like millions have died. Leia sees her home world destroyed, RIP. And I think this is cool. This is pretty much the beginning. I would say that kind of the beginning of the second act. We're kind of getting more into the story now. So what's your thoughts on
I just want to mention real quick about when they meet Han Solo. When
pretty cool interaction.
He says, the famous line, "I made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs."
We're gonna get into that.
Obi-Wan has this look on his face, like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't know. Like, I wonder if like George like told Alec to like have a specific reaction to something, and
Yeah,
that's because
I don't
like
know.
I'm just wondering like why he would react that way. You know what I mean? Like because in my mind it kind of says this guy's lying through his ass. Like he made the
Yeah,
Kessel. Shut up! I don't trust you, dude. Like like he's like savvy enough to be able to see through it, which is kind of because like Han's not really as like smooth and charming as he makes people think he is, which I think is a fun detail.
yeah.
So the Alderaan getting blown up scene. Um, I think this is a testament to this might be a hot take, but the acting in these movies, except Empire, for the most part, has never been necessarily great. Like
Yeah.
Luke, when he discovers that his aunt and uncle were burned alive, doesn't look nearly as like torn up about
He
it as he
did.
should be.
George had him not do
Really?
that. Originally, Mark Hamill dropped down to his knees and was weeping and everything, but George said that it was a little too dramatic for what they were going for.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, his parents just
Yeah.
died.
And then like Leia sees her planet get blown up and like shouts, but
Yeah.
then she's not like she should have been like traumatized for the rest of the movie. So you could either chalk it up to, the writing, directing, whatever, or you could chalk it up to her like, cuz she's in a position of power. So
Yeah.
like she feels really torn up about it on the inside, but in her, she's in a position where she can't afford to break down.
I contribute this to just being in a galaxy far, far away. It's just a little different than ours.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just like a small
Their
thing that I've
emotions
always
are a little
noticed.
different. So what's funny is, I'm sorry, like I said, I got
That's
also in my head. George originally wanted Star Wars to take place in our universe in the 33rd century.
huh.
By the way,
Interesting.
so they didn't do that because they wanted that galaxy far, far away feel to where they could have the Force and not have to explain it like it was in
Oh
our
yeah,
galaxy. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's a good
So
idea.
they decided to make it a reference to Once Upon a Time in the beginning of the crawl in a galaxy far, far away. So now you get that it is this fantastical world, which is why he did that. So now you can have the Force and you don't have to explain it. You just can accept it because it is this different
Yeah, Star Wars is
time, this different era.
essentially a fairy tale, really.
Yes,
At the end of the
and
day,
I love it. And they had the knight, which is Luke. They had the princess, which is Leia. They had the scoundrel, which is Han, and they had the wizard,
yeah,
which is Obi-Wan, and
exactly.
then the Dark Lord. So wow, that's a lot. Okay, like I said earlier, my favorite scene was when Obi-Wan and Luke were talking, but my favorite part of the movie is actually when they are in the Death Star trapped, because Star Wars, they just don't do this enough, and I actually respect the sequel trilogy for doing this. Where I believe it's in The Force Awakens, where they do kind of get captured, and like in A New Hope, they're captured on the Death Star, and they actually have to put on stormtrooper costumes and sneak through, rescue the
Yeah,
princess,
I
make
really
their
like
escape.
this whole
It's
section of the
great.
movie because it's
Yes,
just like like a self-contained like we
exactly.
have to take care of some business in a Obi-Wan. I love when he's like talking to Han saying like he's gonna go turn off the shield generator or the
Yeah,
tractor beam, and then I forget exactly what Han says like you're foolish if you want us to follow you, and then Obi-Wan's like, who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? Like, there's one moment, and then Luke and Han kind of bickering back and forth. Like Han, like finds out about the Princess Leia being there, and he's like, I don't want to rescue no princess. And then Luke's like, hey, if you rescue the princess, you'd get a lot of money. And then Han's immediately like, okay, keep talking. Like
it's
it's such
simple,
fun writing, and
but it makes sense and it's fun.
yeah,
It's not, you don't have to sit and explain everything. You don't have to make things complicated. It is fun and it's a great part of the movie. Her getting rescued, and she gets rescued, and she's like, "Who are you?" You know what I mean? It's not like, "Oh, thank you for rescuing me." It's the complete opposite. It's like, "You're a little short for a
And then
stormtrooper."
she just immediately starts taking charge, and Han's
Yeah,
like,
which
"Excuse me."
I love characters like Leia and Padme because they're not the typical just damsel in distress. They take charge, and a lot of times George has these characters really put up a fight and make them very interesting. So she's Leia, all time great character. Really, all of them are. So, what do you think about this fight? Because fights, um, they get chased through and they end up getting to back to the hangar with the princess. It's just a lot of action at this point. It's great. It's absurd. It's funny. It's whatever. It was great for the time, and it's we can look back and respect it for being from that time. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously today the action's a lot different, but one thing that is contentious is the sword fight. Is the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader. What do you think about it? It's a hot
I
debate
mean,
within the Star Wars community.
I've heard a bunch of perspectives about it. I will say, like, like it's. I've heard people say, "Oh, it's not really about the action itself, but about like all the drama and stuff that surrounds it." So I get that perspective. But at the same time, like, it is kind of not exactly the most exciting thing to watch. But like, it's not about, like, it's about like, these two characters that have a past. Obi-Wan's essentially just trying to like hold off Vader
Yeah.
and give the other characters a chance to escape. Like, he's not really. I don't think they're necessarily trying that hard. It's more so just like their way. Like, it's like a friendly reunion, but they're just engaging in a
So
fight.
yeah, and he even says it. I love it. It's one of my favorite lines ever. If you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
I actually want to get your thoughts real quick. I don't want to like take up that much more time, but um, I'm wondering, in your opinion, do you think that Obi-Wan knew, like, if he like planned to sacrifice himself and like kind of knew that was something he might have to do because he sensed Vader, obviously, and because Vader sensed him, or do you think that he wanted to try and win the fight, and then once he saw them getting back on the ship, he changed his mind? Because I like the way, like, the look on his face right before he like lifts up his saber and lets Vader just strike him down. It kind of looked, it kind of looks to me a little bit like he was like, okay, and now I'm gonna do this, instead of being like, oh, I changed my mind. I think I have to die now. You know what I mean?
I think it was all planned. Tell me, when's the last time you've seen a Sith Force ghost? Never.
Never.
Vader did not have a concept of a Force ghost. Obi-Wan did, and now we know that Obi-Wan did because of Qui-Gon. And I'm really interested to see like maybe a second season of Kenobi, which they don't plan to do, but anyways, or at least getting some kind of story of Qui-Gon talking to Obi-Wan and teaching Obi-Wan from the Force.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that Obi-Wan, obviously he doesn't know exactly when he's going to die or sacrifice himself, but because he did sense Vader, he knew that this was his time, and he baited Vader. I think he baited him.
Yeah, for
'Cause I think
him, it's not, because like the concept of like a spiritual afterlife is obviously present in a lot of like religions and stuff. Like Buddhism was a big influence for the Jedi teachings and stuff. So like,
but
I feel like
yeah,
for Obi-Wan, it wasn't like him dying. It was more so, okay, now I'm gonna transition to the next phase of life.
that was for Obi-Wan, but the way yeah, and you're right, but I love how he baited him
Yeah,
because what does Anakin want? He wants power, and he talked about it at the end of episode 3. You underestimate my power. He thinks he is the most powerful. So how Obi-Wan baits him. He says, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
In Vader's head, Vader's like, no, I'm the most powerful. I'll strike you down and I'll be the most powerful because I defeated you finally. So I think Obi-Wan baits him, and you could see Obi-Wan, he closes his eyes and he puts up his saber, and Vader strikes
And
him
then like
down.
Vader,
Yep.
I just love the detail of like him stepping on
Yeah.
Obi-Wan's rope, because like he doesn't know what just happened. He's like, what? I thought I beat him, but he's gone. What the hell? Okay, So I feel like that was Obi-Wan's last way to kind of like teach his former Padawan one final lesson. Which is like, there are things that your arrogant ass doesn't know and you don't understand because you never wanted to try to.
And what I'll say is, I think that moment right there is the beginning of opening up Vader's eyes. Because like you said, that was one of his last lessons he taught him. Palpatine never taught him how to be a Force ghost.
Yeah.
Palpatine himself didn't know how to become a Force ghost because the Sith did not have that knowledge. Yeah. Now, what happens at the end of Jedi?
Anakin becomes a Force ghost.
Vader takes out the Emperor, and then Vader himself dies, and we see him as a Force ghost later.
Yeah.
There's a lot more we're skipping over with that. But anyways, I love how it comes full circle, and I love that moment between them right here. So Leia, Luke, Han, Chewie, the droids, they escape. They go back to Yavin, I believe.
Yeah, Yavin
4.
Yeah.
And they basically tell the rebellion about the Death Star, whatever. They have the plans, as we see from Rogue One. They got the plans for the reactor that was exposed, and they make the big plan now to do the Death Star run to blow up the reactor core. This is the last act of the movie. I think it's great. We can just kind of end it here by talking about the ending of the movie and what we think about it, because it's kind of we just kind of talked about the biggest emotional part of the movie. That was when Obi-Wan sacrifices himself and they save Leia, and Luke obviously he screams, he bursts out when Obi-Wan dies. Now you get kind of the ending. It's not really that emotional. It just kind of is, let's blow up Death Star and celebrate, which I think it's a great ending. So give me your thoughts on now kind of the last act of the movie. They get to Yavin, they talk to the rebellion, they make the plan, they execute the plan. Like you said, amazing sequence with the Death Star run. Seeing it behind the scenes was incredible. Go watch that documentary. So what do you think about this blowing up the Death Star final push for the movie?
I mean, it's a really iconic scene. It's not necessarily the most exciting, but like it's really impressive. Like the editing and stuff is like really good, like switching between all the different like pilots and stuff. One thing about the sequence that I've always loved is that, like, cause I feel like the prequels kind of made Anakin / Vader a little too much of like a Messiah turned dad kind of thing. But like in this sequence, you see Vader flying a TIE fighter. Like he's just,
I love it. Yeah.
Part of the, like he's high ranking, but he also has to get his hands dirty, by like, flying. I think that's him, having his target set on Luke and being like, the force is strong with this one. That's a nice, Luke hearing Obi-Wan's voice, telling him to let go and reach out with his feelings, which feelings are a thing that pop up throughout the saga in various ways. That's interesting. And then we get Han coming back to, he blow up Vader's fighter and saves Luke, and then lets Luke use the Force to make that shot.
So many great moments.
Which I will say, like, when Vader's TIE fighter blew up, like, how did he not just get stuck in space? Like,
his okay, I don't know. There's it is
like
a
thing I
George
always, and then
movie magic.
This is kind of a foreshadow to when we talk about the sequel trilogy, but a lot of people say Rey's a Mary Sue, oh, she can do this and that,
We're doing so good
But
this
one,
episode.
that that's been a thing with a lot of other Star Wars characters, is that they could just do things. But Luke's barely used the Force in this whole movie, and yet the one time he makes the shot blindly by using the Force, he makes a 1 in a million shot and blows up the Death Star.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not a problem when Luke or Anakin does it. It's a problem when Rey does it. That's weird. But yeah, I'm not gonna get into that. But yeah, it's just icon. Like, I like how it ends with, like, a celebration, and they're getting, like, medals. Like it's something, like, it
Dude,
feels like
I
something
love
out of,
that.
like, a fantasy movie. And there's yeah, it's just fun. Like when Luke,
It's just fun.
Han,
It's
and
so
Leia
fun.
are reunited, and they're, like, celebrating, and then Luke's like, "I knew there was more to you than money or whatever," and then Han's like, "Well, I couldn't let you take all the credit." Like, he came back because he realized he cared, but he's still trying to be like, "Oh no, but I just wanted the credit."
And seeing the breakdown of his character across the original trilogy is awesome. I'll say that. I love character development, and seeing obviously the development of these characters from one movie to the other is awesome. And we didn't talk much about Tarkin or the Emperor, and that's because they weren't really prevalent. Tarkin's cool. He's a governor. I mean, he was a cool villain. It was just really nice seeing his interactions with Leia. But what's interesting is the Emperor. I love how he's just kind of not in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he is even more mysterious than Vader. And I think the Emperor is. People say Vader is the greatest villain in all of pop culture, greatest villain ever in fiction. I disagree. I think it is the Emperor. I think the Emperor is the greatest villain of all time.
I don't really think
yeah,
Vader's a great villain until
exactly.
Empire.
I think he's a great villain within that movie.
Yeah.
But he doesn't die a villain. That's the thing. That's what.
Yeah.
That's the caveat.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this movie, he's an okay villain. I think this movie, it's more of they're fighting against the circumstances they found themselves in, not necessarily against Vader. You see him fight against Vader in the next movie, which we'll get into. But this movie was it's just such a fun science fiction fantasy epic,
Yeah, like, it's, not like, I think the original trilogy's kind of shallow for the most part, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, it's, yeah, because, like, you have to think, the prequels were made, like, when sci-fi movies were kind of, I mean, not that, like, past sci-fi movies didn't have, like, interesting themes, but, like, you think of, like, in 1999, we got The Matrix as well. That was, like, a really, like, conceptual heavy,
yeah. But in
sci-fi
'77,
movie.
there was
So
nothing like that.
like the prequels were made in that environment where sci-fi movies, tried to be more ambitious, whereas the original trilogy was inspired by, like, Flash Gordon serials, which are, really simple. They're essentially fairy tales in space.
Yeah. And I think it's an awesome format, and we're trying to follow the format of the original trilogy by keeping it a little bit more shallow, a little shorter. This doesn't require 4 hours like Revenge of the Sith. So
I think the next
overall,
2 episodes are gonna be a little longer.
Yeah,
there's a little more to talk about, but I mean, not.
This one is a movie you just got to watch because it's fun. There's not much to break down. Like, most of my breakdowns were behind the scenes production, whatever, etc. Not really in universe type of things that we can break down, but it was a fun movie. I had a lot of fun talking about it with you. Overall, I'd give this movie, I think it's, I don't want to rank the movies, but it's in my top 3. This is definitely my top 3. It doesn't get much better than this. I'll put it that way.
I'd probably say it's in my top 3 too.
Yeah.
Like
definitely top 5. Definitely.
Like, nothing's gonna match the experience of when I saw it for the first time and was just blown away by all the practical,
blown away by the music,
all that stuff,
practical optical effects, the Even the acting, it's charming. Not the greatest thing in the world, but they commit, and that's nice. The acting when Peter Mayhew gets in Chewie's costume, he just transforms. He says,
Oh
and
yeah.
you know, 3PO and R2, they are such fun characters in this that kill it. So, um, that's it. I think we like this movie.
Yeah, I think it's
Wouldn't you
safe to
say?
say it's one of the greatest movies of all time.
All right, let's leave it at that. A New Hope. Our takeaway: one of the greatest movies of all time. I like it. I think that was concise. We
Yeah.
had fun. We covered it. Let's leave it at that. So, thanks for coming on. I'm just gonna start it now. Like always, let's end the episode with one movie or game recommendation. You want? How do you
I
want
mean,
to do it?
mine. I haven't.
You go first. We'll make this you go first from now on when we do this.
I mean, I haven't beaten the trilogy yet, but I'm gonna say I just beat Danganronpa 2
Yeah,
earlier today. I recommend people play these games. Just play these games. They're like
great games. Yeah.
not necessarily good, but they're entertaining. They're charming. A lot of twists and turns. The plots, like the second game, like there were. I think like this franchise set the record for the most times I was like playing a game and just said, "What the," like I
Yeah,
just
crazy.
it's
They're
just crazy.
crazy.
Like a
They're
lot
crazy.
of it's the kind of
Twists and turns and
yeah, it's like a Shyamalan
yeah,
movie times like
yeah.
a million. So I would recommend. I can't wait to play the spin-off game, watch the anime, and then play the third game. So I'm technically cheating, but I just can't recommend these games
No.
enough.
That is not cheating. Those are great games. I've tried to get into them. Hopefully, I can finish one day because they're interesting. Now, Tony, mine is a movie recommendation. It just came out. It is called Flamin' Hot.
Yeah,
It,
that's you're gonna have
it's
to
a
sell me a
Hulu.
little bit on that because just by that summary, I was like, huh?
It's a Hulu original, and it is about the creation of the Flamin' Hot brand of Cheetos and whatnot. The whole Flamin' Hot brand. So basically, synopsis here: there was a Mexican janitor working in Southern California at a Frito plant, and he was looking around and he saw only bland, you know, flavors that were marketed for white people. So him being, in the Spanish
Yeah,
community and being, Mexican was like, we need to see chips, that are for our people too and different cultures. So he basically took the flavors and all of that he grew up with, the spicy flavors, and made a slurry for the Cheetos, and somehow as a janitor got it to the CEO and said, you know, we want to see ourselves on the shelves too. So they ended up taking his idea and they made him. I'm not gonna spoil it, anyways. But they ended up taking his idea, and it was about the whole creation of Flamin' Hot
huh?
brand. But it's a multicultural story. It's not just about the chips. It's about the it's cool.
Is
It's very cool.
Xochitl
So
Gomez in that who plays America Chavez? Because I saw her post on Instagram where she was at the premiere.
I'm looking now. I don't see it.
Okay.
No, but it's a very very good movie. All right, so that's it. Had a lot of fun, and next one is Empire. That'll be interesting. So this was episode 23, and next time we'll see you on episode 24 for The Empire Strikes Back.